August, the Fed meeting with the Rothschildians recently brought out more desperate measures by the fast-fading global elites. They were talking about using TRNs, that came up again recently, as a new note and taxing heavily all the big companies who previously paid little or no taxes. This was to take place with immediate effect to raise funds for tomorrow's RV. Oh dear. You know what happened? It failed. Trump took on the remaining Koch brother, Charles, after David quit 1 or 2 months previously, about a week or so after speaking to Kim. Funny that. The Koch brothers were another hidden group with rich family backgrounds dictating policies and politics, finances, all of which have failed in the control system ideology. Further hacking attempts were made to get into the system out of Singapore and also New Zealand, and they were trying to implement a new black screen system, which is another backdoor version of the old system, and that failed. Fraudulent notes are filtering into the US now with 2013 printed on them, and all of these are fraud, with no new notes with the correct and verified allocation numbers, which haven't been printed since 2009. No new notes were issued after 2009. Work was underway to deal with that issue. The Philippines was reported to have warehouses full of pesos that have been there since Marduk was in charge, and they're now trying to rolling them out and attempting to buy gold with them from the locals. But it turns out the locals have been duped also, as the gold bars they think they have are only gold plated. So expect some fun and games in the Philippines in the near future, and it did unveil. I also reported I was getting frequent reports around the world of issues with banks and unable to get access to accounts. And I gave a further warning, is you all must have spare cash now at all times. These incidents will increase. In fact, we had a news item about last week in the UK. A person was refused access to their account, even though it was $10,000 or £10,000 in it. And I warned back in August that these will increase as their funding, or better term, looting avenues, are all being closed down. We got news that the deep state had sent a message to Obama through an interview on CNN that he's no longer protected. He's been hung out to dry like Anne. And then we had the classic Looney Tunes Nancy Pelosi trying to implement a plastic straw ban as being important for gun control. Yeah, I said it right. And she went on, it stops pea shooting and spitballing, which are gateway guns, according to Pelosi. That complete retard is the Speaker of the House. Oh my. Pea shooters, gateway guns. Okay. Roths put out another contract, a hit piece contract on Kim on the dark web in August. Except this came with a massive difference. Normally when contracts go out on the dark web, there's a load of people fighting over the contract because they want the money. Only this time, no one came forward to take that task on, which is a big step for us. And now it's really, the heat is on the Rothschilds. Less and less are listening to their lying and conniving ways anymore. People are not buying it. And their power, control and wealth is eroding away. And the message was, you should have took the offer Kim gave you 18 to 24 months back. Those you used and trample over may now come back to bite you. Have a nice day, Roths. Venezuela issue. There was a lot of trouble going on in Venezuela, and more fear porn put on the alt media. The real issue in Venezuela is to do with the FARC guerrillas, who are another of the aspect of the Rothschilds paid armies, who are being funded via oil deals and also other minerals. And some of those guerrillas were sent to attack Kim previously. They were the ones in February or March. And the issue is the UN, or Rothschild's portion of the UN, have been training Hugo Chavez's daughter for its stooge role in Venezuela, using the popularity her father had. But the daughter is not of that ilk. And I gave warning to the people of Venezuela to see through the illusion. Venezuela is also where they are sending Muslim Brotherhood jihadists via Oman and Saudi Arabia, and the port is also used to process the stolen ISIS oil there, which is not working out too well. So the clowns are now trying to use Mexico to process the ISIS oil. Then there was a bill highlighted on the internet. I think it was one of the QAnons I got this from. HR 5181 was stuffed into the 2016 NDAA on December the 2nd, just before Trump took over, and basically allocated $160 million was set aside to pay alt media journalists, amongst others, to spread disinformation to counter what they claim is fake news. There you have it. Paid alt media journalists. So this runs nicely into the next item. Alex Jones, paid alternative media journalist. He had a meltdown in this month, which was a psyop. It's the usual, look, I'm being attacked, so I must be valid, which is classic Wilcock and is also a classic agency tactic. And it resembles all the fuss a few years back when Alfred Weber got banned off Facebook. That was another sideshow, as he is a government agent. He worked under the Carter administration, Mr. Weber. Jones is COINTELPRO, pure and simple. He works with the Stratfor Group, known for links with Israeli intelligence. And he rants and raves in his show about the cabal and corporate control, and yet the same man makes $300 million a year in advertising the very companies that are damaging us with their core pirate tactics. Do you really think those companies would promote a genuine whistleblower that is exposing their own company's role in the control system? Well, do you? IMF again. Many countries are now starting to see through the illusion and making inquiries with varying degrees of success. And I've said before, you would be astonished at how little governments and state officials really know. Well, now they're starting to learn some real truth for the first time. Now, of course, there's a backlash to that in differing countries, as the IMF march in demanding payments that each country allegedly owes. They don't. Now they know each country is owed massive dividends from the trust and not debt instruments of the cabal. So the IMF started to go around threatening countries, and now they are reduced to asking countries to lend them money, as they, like the UN, now don't have a pot to piss in. And the key now is for those countries threatened to all combine together and force the pirates and the bandits out of your region. Funds are there for each country once the blocking and threats die down, and we requested that they hold their nerve in spite of threats to the country leaders or their children in some cases. They threatened the First Lady's children in Ecuador. It came to note that the clowns are messing with all different types of communications, and be it mobile phones, landlines, internet banking, ATMs, and the word was it won't always be this way. More hacking attempts and more blocking attempts on the quantum system. Once again the hacking failed. Once again the quantum system recognised it and recorded who did it, and eventually they will be unable to hack or block. In August there was 3 attempts on Trump's life in the previous 6 weeks. His bodyguard in Scotland took the bullet for him. He jumped in front of Trump when they shot at him, which is not published too heavily in the alt media. But then neither was the missile fired at Air Force One previously in the year. And then we did a piece which will take us into the next music break on the government. And this doesn't just apply to America, it's about America. It applies to all governments. It's a system, it's a corporation, not a government. But the government is blamed for a lot of things that they have no control over, like ET disclosure. It is 26 levels above the president. 3, 4 and 5 letter groups in this country have no congressional oversight. All of them. Government were blocked out of any involvement or direct knowledge of the ET issue after the humanity treasonist Eisenhower sold us out. And this is why Kennedy tried to get the ET papers lowered to government level and signed off on an agreement with Russian counterpart Brezhnev on November the 11th or 12th of 1963. You all know what happened next. And what that would have done is America and the USSR, as it was then, would exchange all ET-related papers to each country. And this, in effect, was an attack on the secrecy levels, which today is called the deep state. People's in secrecy levels above the president up to 49, although I hear that number goes higher. Yes, there's only one person that's higher than that, and that's Kim, level 64, the highest on the planet. Whilst the president is level 23. So 11 or 12 days after signing that agreement, Kennedy was dead. Don't think for one moment Kennedy was doing that for the people. He wasn't. It was a faction war, perhaps like now, and was against the Bush group. They were trying to take the Bush group down. The government has no control over the military. This is part of the inner war that I describe. Either they are owned by the SSP, which we can confirm, but also the Rothschilds think they own it, and the Jesuits claim they have owned it since the 1500s. The government has no control over income tax, or receives any of it. Zero. Nothing. Zip. Nada. For those new to the show, the IRS is not an American company. It's not on American soil. It is a trust of the Crown, stationed in Puerto Rico. The government has no control over the Fed or the IRS. They are operatives for and by the Crown. The government has no control over the media, as proven more so in this past 18 months than any other time. And there is a reason why Trump is calling it fake news. It all started with CBS back in the 1920s. Wonder how many people realise what the C stands for. It's Columbia, as in District of Columbia. They were working with the OSS, now known as the CIA, to produce propaganda for American audiences. 1920. The government has no control over the SSP, the real secret space program ongoing since the 1940s minimum, and part of which was Majestic 12 until recently, when the whole of Majestic 12 was taken out by the order. The government has no control over policy that is dictated way higher up. The government has no control, and neither do the people until possibly the last election, as time will tell on that, of who is voted in or voted out. So maybe it was time to stop blaming the government for everything and target who the real issue is. The faceless men. Hi all, welcome back, and we will continue with our year review, and we're still in August and things are starting to escalate. Military tribunals for top names came up again in August, and I wanted to reiterate to the top brass covering those trials that it was the alt media who drove this truth narrative that led to the exposure of these criminal elites. And I felt and directly requested against some members of the alternative community to be in attendance of any future military tribunal. We have to be transparent going forward, and members of our community selected should be able to observe real justice being served. So it's not a sideshow tribunal none of us can see or hear, which is then wrapped up in the bullshit called national security. For numbers of decades, we required transparent, instant justice. Those are still being mentioned, by the way. And the second request done that in that show was that Hillary, should Hillary be convicted in a military tribunal, one of the conditions to remain alive for the rest of its lifetime is it should be made an example of and should be made to read out on national TV across all stations all the crimes she has been found guilty of. This has multiple implications. One, the general public gets it from the horse's mouth, so no more hearsay. Two, it will start the healing process of the soul, if she has one. I suspect not. That is no guarantee, as many in here are soulless and can work off some of her karma before the next lifetime. People will say, why should we care about healing her? Well, it's a valid point. But carrying the karma over into multiple lifetimes could lead to continuous cycle of negativity in that soul. And what if they all meet up again in the next lifetimes? One could argue that karma should be erased after this lifetime, given interference done here, and we all have a fresh start. And it's something many should ponder on this piece. I know many want eye for an eye, but if we keep doing that, we all go blind. We all learn something new every day, and this was revealed to me in August. At this time, I'd moved to my permanent location, or temporary permanent location, to be working with Kim permanently. And there was a rather detailed call where something came up that was quite a shock, not only to me, although I did suspect it, what was revealed in the show. And it was all religions were a human experiment to see how they reacted to it. And essentially it was a disconnect you from source program, and an eventual worship program to the false gods, Akka, Ra, Isis, Horus, etc. And then this then took on other forms as the experiment obviously worked in some aspect of as the memory of our connection to source over time faded. Around 2,000 years ago, it took a bad turn for the worst. In came the Christian religion and Catholicism, and Constantine added all new layers when in Jerusalem, which was not modern-day Jerusalem, but Jerusalem back then was Constantinople. The original Jerusalem was in Russia, under the guise of the Rus. And around 1100 AD, a splinter group of Christians was formed and was known as the Muslim sect. That's where Muslim came from. In the 1500s, protesting Catholics then morphed into a Protestant religion. You see, it's all part of the same thing. All are superseded in the experiment by the Torah book for Hebrews and the Talmud book for non-Hebrews. That's the other way around. The Torah is the Christian version that people can read, given to them by the Hebrews. The Talmud is only for the more radical Jewish people, because once you read some of the things in the Talmud, you'd want to kill the person on the spot, or some people would. Of course, later in the year we did cover some of the excerpts out of the Talmud, which is why it's not available for general sale. Now, it's my understanding that the original Hebrews, in inverted commas, are Anunnaki in DNA, or ran by them. Both are known as the chosen ones. Under source, there were no special ones. We were all created equal. Hierarchy is the reign of the ego for those who thought they were above creation. They will meet their maker soon and find out their own folly and karma. Desperation levels ramping up in many countries across the globe, particularly in Africa and South and Central America, with the continuing threats from the UN, IMF and the World Bank. But more countries now are not buying into their bullshittery anymore, and this is a significant change and a further erosion of the old system ways. Who funds the IMF if it runs out of cash? The United States, go figure, is the biggest political player in the fund. Congress this month was asked to stump up 18 billion or more for the IMF. It didn't go ahead. The 3 stages of truth and how it applies to Kim and the Man of World Holding Trust and the team. On all the top levels in each country. First, it's ridiculed. Second, it's violently opposed. And third, it is accepted as being self-evident. So where are we at? Well, we have gone through stage 1 of it being ridiculed. And the second stage of it being violently opposed has largely been passed through also. As for stage 3 as being accepted as self-evident, we need to split that into 2 categories by adding another stage called, oh my, what do we see there? Is it real? And was it the truth all along? We are in some aspects at the first stages of stage 3. An escalation of that and an event now will trigger stage 3 in full and will be accepted as self-evident. Then the funding will begin. That continues. Then we announced the figure there are 1.3 billion people alive today operating without electricity. A staggering statistic in today's modern world, when billions are spent laying pipelines for oil and trillions spent fighting over oil. The fact that roughly 20% of the world's people don't have access to electric. Ridiculous. Then we outed further unknown intel about the Rodney King event. The people who filmed the Rodney King event were there on their first visit to America, but were linked to Australian intelligence, who are linked with the CIA, aka Five Eyes. So they were there on purpose. The two people who were in the car with Rodney King that night both died in the car. They were shot. And yet why has nothing been mentioned about it? And the question that was put out in the show remains as why Rodney King, who was serving an 8-year jail sentence, was let out after 3 weeks. And then that incident happened soon after. Rodney King was paid a lot of money to film that event. And they knew what he was going to do. They built him a house with a pool. Except Rodney couldn't swim. How did he die? He drowned. 2 and 2 equals. Life, when viewed from outside the box, throws up all kinds of things to ponder on, some of which we've covered in the shows. But a repeated one crops up, maybe every day for some, maybe a few times a week for others, and it all plays into perspective. Children get much chastised and then often psychologically referred to so-called specialists if they keep mentioning imaginary friends. So, a few things about this. A child has more senses ages 0 to 6 and then has them dulled by society and undertaught parents. And I don't care how many levels of degrees and masters and all that you have, we have all been undertaught. Only recently have we delved into what is classed as paranormal. Interesting term. Para means beyond, altered or against when merged with normal. It really tells you the term normal is a control system. Beyond normal, altered normal or against normal. But the question is, who decided what was normal to begin with? And why haven't we really questioned what is normal? Normal defines boundaries and limits, and is another way of reductionism I mentioned in a previous show. You could say normal is what's in the box. Well, the box is the system that has limited everything. A bit like the term, the sky is the limit. Really? It might be your limit, but it's not mine. Everywhere you look in society, it's all about reductionism and limitation, and for too long, too many have just consumed far too easily. So back to the imaginary friends. Society tells us one thing but always covers up another, and it's all about perspective. Perspective should be your view of the world, not somebody else's, or largely one that has been created for you to follow. The question is, why are children who have imaginary friends treated with derision, ridicule or worse, sent to book-read psychologists, and yet more than 3 billion people or more can parade around the planet declaring a love for someone they've never met in person, entrusting and dedicating their whole lives to this one person called Jesus, who in essence is an imaginary friend. It's funny, isn't it? But you see, it's all about perspectives, isn't it? Psychotic AI, magnetic field, overlay frequency, the veil, the simulation is gone or faded to a point of non-interference was announced in August. We are only experiencing the memory of it. Those who hold on to the memory are holding on to the control system. A case of give it energy and it comes to you. Don't and it's not there. It's a bit like making a curry-based meal. The meal, the dishes, the pans are all gone and clean, but the smell lingers for days and weeks. And here's an example of, hello, McFly. I will spare mentioning the country involved, but this is indicative of the levels of utter synth-like behaviour of follow a path that has always failed. Kim spoke to a particular country in August and was offering them substantial funds to kickstart projects, all free from the trust. They did their due diligence on the trust and it all stacked up. But in came the IMF stormtroopers and suddenly the country decided it didn't want free money from the trust and decided it would borrow with interest from the IMF. I kid you not. And this is the levels of stupidity, corruption and skullduggery of those operating at the top levels of many of the countries. Like we said in the show the previous week to this, I hope all countries now demand their loans off the IMF with a 3-day payout stipulation and then come back to us when all that fails as well. Clowns in August tried a double-pronged attack to enter the quantum system from Hong Kong and also the naval base in Virginia, which is likely run by the SSP, which was later confirmed. Both failed individually and collectively. Both received a humorous message and both had their systems crashed and burned. It will take at least 2 weeks to a month to get their systems back up and running. The cabal and their minions are literally spending their last resources now intent to pull off their RV program and stop the quantum system and the trust. Much was being made in August of Trump making payments via his lawyer to the slapper known as Daniels, the slapper, whatever her name is. And yet, Stormy Daniels. And yet, it's funny, the Portal people never mentioned that Barack Obama gave a $150,000 bribe to silence a hate preacher, Jeremiah Wright. Or that Bill Clinton paid Paula Jones $850,000 to go away. I don't seem to recall the Portal people focusing on that too much. We gave out more details of the Rothschilds and their so-called quantum system under the Wright-Patterson Air Base. Their clearance only allows them to go 6 levels down of the 13 levels below Wright-Patterson, and the bottom 7 levels belongs to the non-terrestrials, and they are protected under the peace treaty. Except the minions decided they needed more power for their system and drilled a hole from level 6 through to level 8 to hook up to another system. Well, despite that, that failed also. Luckily for them, they did no real damage, or Wright-Patterson Air Base in its entirety would no longer exist. The weaponry they have below our feet is way above what is on the surface. A new input of source energy was added this weekend in August, and this will bring increased changes on many levels. The final piece tonight, which is fairly long, was covered in August, and this will complete August. When people speak of the event or events, and ask when it's happening, and my answer is always, which event? And is it not the case that many events have already happened? If you think not, you've just not connected the dots yet, which is understandable given the amount of bullshittery everywhere. Well, here are the events that have already taken place. I could stop at number 1, but there's 30 plus. Number 1, we are not dead. We should have all been gone by 2012. Number 2, Kim took over the trust and designated it for all the benefit of all the countries and its people and not the clowns. Event 3, the peace treaty ended 16,500 years of martial law. It also ended the shipping war and law more commonly known as Admiralty law or maritime law in 2016, and yes, we know it's still operating. Work is underway. 4, the Draco left in 2015 except a few minions. 5, the parents went from 21 down to 2. Both of them are insane, neither are here anymore, and only have VI projections of themselves being in here. One is known as the Red Queen. 6, the Covens collapsed from 13 down to 2, and we are unsure whether that 2 is now down to 0. 7, the Illuminati no longer exists and is now broken into 5 factions: the Jesuit, Asian, Zionist, Nazi and secret societies. All are fighting each other and also infighting. 8, the Rothschilds, who support all 5 factions, have had to have a fire sale of a number of properties this year, sold most of their stocks this year, lost control of the Crown, lost control of Washington DC and many other regions, lost control of the mercenaries as they are refusing to take on Rothschild's hit squad tasks now. Their alleged quantum system they rolled out crashed and burned on first attempt. A top Rothschild is in big health trouble, I'm hearing. 9, soul traps and memory wipes and forced reincarnation ended 2013 through 2014. Number 10, the Saturn Moon Matrix and also the Saturn entity rendered obsolete. 11, CERN also rendered obsolete in August of 2015. 12, the psychotic AI rendered obsolete. That was in November of 15. 13, the Matrix veil or simulation all rendered obsolete, although only remnants in our memory loss keep it real. In reality, it's not. 14, Marduk was taken out permanently following a request by us to remove him was sent to the council, which was agreed to, and we removed him permanently in late 2016. That was a big loss to them, as only he knew the full system and how it all worked. 15. Kim and the trust took over the whole banking system and has blocked them from accessing it despite numerous attempts at hacking, usually one day before the mythical RV. All of them failed. Kim has proven to all and sundry only she has the codes that work, and only she can release the trust funds. Only she has the assets to support it also. She has released some funds, this is back in August, to some countries, but plans are blocking all attempts of funds reaching America currently. That's still ongoing and being worked on, as this country is under a financial assassination order by the Rothschilds, Dragon Groups, SSP and others. 16. Project Blue Beam failed. 17. Global biological extinction weapons failed. 18. World War III failed and won't be returning. 19. A collection of all countries' in-ground resources failed. That would have led to World War III should they have got that. 20. Kim took over the UN, stripped the assets they had stolen and gave them back to all the countries to whom it belonged. 21. The alt media came out of the dark shadow casters, conspiracy theorists and nutters. Most so-called conspiracies are now in the public eye and are based in fact. Despite alt media being a fraction of what it once was, the few left carried the can, the co-opted and agency-paid shills are being laid bare by this show and also Randy Morgan's. 22. Portal people, aka mainstream, trashed into almost oblivion now, considering many people now think CNN is and others are fake news. 23. The churches laid bare for what they really are, a total sham. That was an initial experiment played on the people. All religions are part of that experiment, to take you away from who and what you are, make you forget source. And of course we also had the pedos being exposed, the financial skullduggery exposed, the heinous slaying of the people's teachers and their offspring, Radomir and Mary Magdalene, done by the church. Church also have been exposed in recent years for slaying the seers, the visionaries and the psychics, all burnt at the stake. Created wars for their sacrifices to their so-called gods, killing multi-millions and satanic behaviours and horrific rituals. 24. Politicians and stars exposed for fraud, sexual misconduct, cult practices, satanic behaviours, ritual abuse and sacrifice. 25. The GMO kings, Monsanto, crashed and burnt. That was a big plus, far more than people realise. 26. Chinese elders proven fake despite various detailed attempts to seek them out. No one on this planet knows who they are, for good reason. They don't exist. 27. Nibiru, fake asteroids hitting us. RV, GCRs, NESARA, GESARA, OPPT, ZIMs, dongs, dinars, cryptocurrencies, all rendered fake or obsolete. 28. The IMF and the World Bank exposed as financial terrorists, and other organisations will also follow that description. 29. Charities and fake foundations exposed for money laundering, trafficking for sexual and labour purposes, child trafficking for labour, sexual abuse, adrenochrome and ritual sacrifices. 30. We made peace with many of the non-terrestrials here, and work continues on that front. 31. Kim declared America sovereign for the first time in its history, recorded anyway. The last event for tonight is ongoing. 32. But never forget how far you have come as a person or a group. You've all learned the truth to varying degrees of learning, unravelled many of the lies, unveiled many of the masks, and carried on despite threats, ridicule, and anger directed at you from so-called friends, family, and loved ones. Many have learned how to be more compassionate, more caring, more sharing. You speak of we and us and less of me and I. You've learned how to defend yourselves via shielding, learned how to live and love life again, learned personal responsibility and perspective. People have quit drugs, quit alcohol, quit pharmaceuticals, and stopped suicides. All of these are events bigger than you all thought. Now it's all laid out. Perhaps it will give you all the time to reconsider when is the event happening. The answer is most of it already has. We have much to look forward to as we strip bare the service to self clowns, the special ones, the families and their minions who have consumed our energy and souls in vast quantities. The psychopaths intent on war and destruction. We have an opportunity to create a world in our image, not the Lord and his band of reptilians, but in our image, our way and our path, one that doesn't require harvesting us or killing anyone, one that doesn't require overthrowing governments as they know or knew nothing, a world that doesn't require spying on everyone, a world that doesn't require starving 40% of the people, a world that doesn't have 1.1 billion that lack access to safe drinking water, or 2.6 billion that lack adequate sanitation. A world that doesn't require killing 49,000 children per day. A world that doesn't require millions living in poverty, where 3 billion people live on less than $2.50 per day, or 1.3 billion live on $1.25 per day, or 1 billion children living in poverty, while death and destruction psychopaths spend 1.7 trillion per year globally on military and weaponry. A world that doesn't require 1.2 or 1.3 billion living without electricity. A world that doesn't require fighting over resources, land or control. It requires none of that. That was their system, not ours. Everyone has a moral and an outright duty to fight, strive, and work hard to create that better world for us all. An obligation to protect and serve humanity. An obligation to protect and serve the children, and lay the foundations for our journey from a childlike backward species requiring others to look after us to a peaceful, space-faring race, of which we can be deemed a proud and worthy adult species. Peace, prosperity and freedom are not something you wish for. You have forgotten you have the ability to create it. It's up to each and every one of you to create that reality. You wanted events. You've already had them. Now go out and be a part of creating our new world. It's united we stand, divided we fall. This has been part 2 of the 2018 year review. My name is Thomas Williams. See you tomorrow. Bye for now.